Welcome. Today we're going to talk about grants. Not grant, grants. That's better. Stick around. Welcome back. Well, I'd like to talk to you about grants today. Number one, we have grants that are based on your contributions. And this is the grants that most people get when they open up an RESP. It's probably the grant that you're going to get for your child. And also, there's also grants that are available based on your income levels. So if your income is low enough, or household income is low enough, you can qualify for certain grants that are just simply given without any contributions needed. And no money discussion is complete without TLCs, terms, limits, and conditions. All right. Now, the basic grant that most people get, and it's probably the grant that you're going to get, is called the Canadian Education Savings Grant. Okay, and that is given to any child up until the end of the year, of the calendar year that they turn 17 years old. Okay, so as long as your child turns 17 years old or younger in that year, up to December 31st of that year, you can qualify for the Canadian Education Savings Grant. And the way it works is basically when you contribute into the RESP, the government matches 20% of your contribution, up to $500 per year. Okay, so every year the government will give you up to $500 of grants based on your RESP contributions. Okay, so pretty straightforward. If you contribute $2,500 a year into your child's RESP, then you're all set to basically receive the maximum allowable grant from the government of $500. Now, what if you did not make RESP contributions in previous years and did not get all that grant money? Well, the good news is you can get some of that back. You can trickle some of that in year after year as retroactive grants. So if you contribute more than $2,500 a year into your child's RESPs, the government will match the surplus of that contribution at 20% again to give you some of that retroactive grant. But the government will only give you up to $500 in retroactive grants there. So again, if you, let's say, had $500 available of previous year's grant, then you could basically get the government to give you that $500 by making $5,000 of contribution into your RESP this year. So $5,000, the first $2,500 would get you the grant money available from this current year, and the second $2,500 at 20% would give you $500 of previous year's available grant room that the government would have hadn't given you yet. So it's really important to plan this out, particularly, let's say, if your child is a little bit older and you want to get the grants from previous years. You have to basically be careful about just making sure you make the right amount of RESP contributions so that you can maximize those grants. Now, if you have over $500 of previous grants available from the government from previous years that the government hasn't given to your child, the beneficiary, then if you make $2,500 of contributions for this year and you make an additional $2,500 of contribution, totaling $5,000 of contribution, the total grants awarded to you will be $500 for the current year and then $500 from retroactive years where if you did not receive that $500 before. Okay, so that's how you can plan this out. Now, also remember that there's also a lifetime guarantee. The government will not give you more than $7,200 of grants per beneficiary. Okay, so if you start from when your child is born, and you're in the 14 or 15 year of contributions, you steadily max out your contributions every year at $2,500 a year, then basically by your 15th year, you'll have maxed out what the government will give you in grants. So another important thing to keep in mind when you're considering how much money to contribute into your child's RESP. Now, one important thing I want to mention here is that if you're starting your child's RESP late in life, meaning when they're approaching 16 or 17 years of age, they may not qualify for the grants in those years. Okay, so if your child's if you have a child that's turning 16 in 1 year, turning 17 years of age in 1 year, they may not qualify for government grant, for RESP grants, unless one of the following conditions is met. That in previous years, in 4 different years, it doesn't need to be consecutive, they have to be in 4 different years prior, you at least made $100 of RESP contributions into your child's RESP, and you did not subsequently withdrew that money. You had to stay as long as the money stood in the RESP. But you made 4 different years, you made at least $100 contributions in the RESPs, then you're good. Or you had made $2,000 of overall contributions into your child's RESP, and you did not withdraw the money. Those are the 2 conditions. As long as you meet, when your child is turning 16 or 17 years of age in those calendar years, you will receive grant monies if either one of those 2 conditions is true. Okay, really important to know that. Now, the government also has special programs in place for families who are of lower income. So if you're making contributions into your child's RESP and your household income is $45,916 or less, then basically for the first $500 of contribution that you make, your child will receive a 40% grant, as opposed to a 20% grant for that first $500. So normally you would get a $100 grant for that first $500 of contribution, but now the government will give you $200 of grant for that first $500 contribution. Okay, and if your household income is between $45,916 and $91,831, if you're within those limits, then that first $500 of contributions the government will match 30% as opposed to matching 20%. So you'll get $150 worth of grant for that first $500 of contribution. Now from there, the rest of the contributions that you make into your RESP gives you the same grant money as normal. There's no additional piece right there. Okay, and of course, if you make more than $91,831, then basically the government will just give you the regular grants that we've talked about before. Okay, so it's an important thing to note. If your household income levels are within those limits, the government will give you additional grants based on your income and based on your contribution. Okay. Now, the second program I want to talk to you guys about is called the Canadian Learning Bond, and essentially the CLB is a program in which the government will give you money to put into your child's RESP, but without you having to make contributions. It's totally based on your household income and not based on the contributions you make into your registered education savings plan. Now, in order to qualify, your child must have turned 15 years of age or younger in the calendar year that you're going to receive the grant. So if your child turns, let's say, 16 years of age this year in 2020, then your child would no longer qualify to receiving a Canadian Learning Bond. But if your child turned 15 years of age or any year younger this year, then your child would qualify for a Canadian Learning Bond. And the way it works is this: is as long as you are within the income limits, household income limits, which I'll discuss in a bit here, and your child is under 15 years of age or younger, the government will provide $500 for the first year that you qualify for the Canadian Learning Bond. And any subsequent years that you qualify, the government will give you $100 for each of those years. And those are per beneficiary numbers. So it's $500 per beneficiary in the first year that you qualify, and then any subsequent number of years you have after that, it's $100 per beneficiary per year. And the lifelong limit, there's an overall limit that the government will give here. The government will give no more than $2,000 per beneficiary for lifelong for participating in the Canadian Learning Bond. So there's an overall limit there. Now, again, the Canadian Learning Bond does not require you to make any RESP contributions. Sometimes, depending on the institution where you open up the RESP may there may be a required initial deposit like $100 or $500, but beyond that, the government does not require any deposits at all for qualifying into the Canadian Learning Bond. Now, again, the income levels that I mentioned will be dependent on the number of children or number of dependents that you have in your household. So if you have 1 to 3 children and your household income is totaling less than $47,000, then basically you're free. You qualify. But if you have 4 children, that limit increases to $53,740. And if you have 5 children, that limit increases to $59,876, and so forth. And you can go, depending on the number of children you have, up to 16. There's different limits set up, and you can see those limits on the Government of Canada Revenue Agency website. Now, one thing to remember about all these limits, and the same thing applies for the additional Canadian Education Savings Program, all these limits will shift 1 year after the next. The government is constantly adjusting these limits just to keep pace with inflation and perhaps other factors that are in their calculations. So just keep an eye on those limits, as they will change year after year. Now, here's a curious little strategy you can take to basically fund your child's RESP without taking a single dime out of your pocket. Now, basically, we call this a Canadian Child Benefit RESP strategy. So basically, the way it works is the government will pay for some families a Canadian child benefit. Well, rather than pocketing that, just recycle that in and put that into your child's RESP. Now, when you do that, a couple of things will happen. Number one is you'll get grants. So you're going to boost up your CCB payment by having an extra 20% brought in from the government there, supplemented from the government. And then if your income levels qualify within the Canadian Learning Bond, you will also receive Canadian Learning Bond deposits from the government there as well. So this is a nice little strategy where you can build up a nest egg for your child's education, technically without spending a single dime out of your pocket. Now, I'd like to thank you for watching this short little video. I hope it was informative for you. And I'd like to, if you haven't seen our previous videos that talk about the basics of RESPs, how do RESPs work, or about group RESPs, I encourage you to check those out. We also have new videos coming in that are going to talk about how to take the money out of your RESP for your child's education, and basically how to avoid taxes, or at least minimize the taxes depending on the situation that you're in. And last, we'll also have a video to talk about, well, what happens if your child does not go to school. Check that out. We have a whole video that's about that covers that piece as well. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you again for watching, and like always, keep putting that knowledge into action.